All right, so today we're going to deep dive into those unwritten rules of the sky, airplane etiquette.
Hmm.
We've all been there, I think, crammed in a seat, hoping the person in front doesn't recline all the way back.
Yeah.
Um, but this Reddit post that we found, it takes it to a whole new level, and it got us thinking.
Okay.
How do you handle those awkward moments when someone's pushing the boundaries of personal space on a plane?
Right. Like, where's the line?
Exactly. And this is where this story gets so interesting because it really highlights how one simple question about space, can turn into a huge etiquette debate.
Yeah, we all have our own, expectations about what's acceptable on a plane, but what happens when, those expectations clash?
Yeah, so picture this. You're on a Delta 757. You're lucky enough to snag that exit row seat.
Okay.
29F to be exact.
Yeah.
No seat in front of you, all that glorious legroom.
Ah.
But then the passenger in the row ahead, 28E, decides to use both their own entertainment system
Uh-oh.
and the one in the empty seat in front of them. Not only that, but they've stashed their bag under that empty seat too.
So for anyone who's not familiar with airplane layouts, on a 757, the exit row seats often have that empty space in front because of the door.
Right.
So you get that extra legroom, but it also creates this like gray area of who controls that space.
Totally. And the original poster in this Reddit thread, they were planning on using both the monitor and the space under that empty seat, which seems pretty reasonable, right?
Yeah, I mean, you would think so.
But the comments section, oh boy, is a battlefield.
Oh, the internet and a good etiquette debate. Name a more iconic duo.
Right.
What did people say?
Well, some people were all for, claiming that space like it's yours, end of story kind of attitude.
Yeah.
But others were suggesting a more passive approach, like stowing their bag in their own foot space until a flight attendant noticed and maybe intervened for safety reasons.
Interesting tactic, almost like a silent protest.
Yeah. But would a flight attendant really get involved in a dispute over who gets to use the entertainment system?
It's tricky. I mean, their main priority is safety and keeping things running smoothly.
Right.
A minor space dispute might not be their top concern, unless it's causing like a real disruption.
So what is the etiquette-approved move here?
Well, we dug into some expert advice and found this Rosalinda Randall, a California-based etiquette expert.
Okay.
And she suggests a couple of options. Either politely ask the flight attendant to step in or just let it go.
Two very different approaches.
Right.
I'm sensing a choose your battles theme.
Absolutely.
So she even offers some specific phrases to use, like, it's a bit confusing, but that's my designated space.
Uh-huh.
Or, are these yours? Sorry, but it looks like I'm going to need my space.
Okay, so polite but firm.
I like that. Clear and direct, but not aggressive.
Right.
But still, I mean, this whole situation seems super awkward.
Oh, for sure. Air travel can be stressful. People are on edge. Nobody wants to start a confrontation at 30,000 feet.
But thinking about this specific scenario, I think it raises a much bigger question about, personal space on airplanes in general.
Yeah, it's not just about entertainment systems. It's about those, like, unwritten rules of shared space that just seem to get extra complicated in that confined airplane environment.
It's almost like those unwritten rules are magnified when you're stuck in a metal tube for hours.
Yeah, exactly.
With hundreds of strangers.
So how do we even begin to decipher these unwritten rules?
Yes.
Where's the line between asserting our own space and respecting the space of others?
Yeah, especially when everyone's a little on edge.
Totally.
So how do we even start to unpack some of those most common airplane etiquette dilemmas?
Well, let's start with...
Yeah, because I think we can all agree a little etiquette knowledge can go a long way towards making everyone's flight a bit more bearable.
Yeah, for sure. And who knows, maybe by, understanding these unwritten rules a little better, we can all avoid becoming that person on the plane.
Right, exactly.
That we all dread sitting next to.
Yeah, nobody wants to be that person.
Nobody wants to be that person.
So let's jump in and start unpacking these dilemmas.
Okay, let's do it. So let's dive into some of the most common, airplane etiquette conundrums.
Okay.
I think we've all probably encountered them at some point.
Yeah.
First up, the dreaded reclining seat dilemma.
Oh, the reclining seat, the source of so many, passive-aggressive sighs.
Yeah.
And awkward shoulder taps.
And you've got the person in front wanting to be comfortable.
Right.
And the person behind them feeling like their space is being invaded.
Yeah, where's the line?
Right.
Yeah.
Is it ever okay to fully recline?
That's the million-dollar question.
What does etiquette expert Rosalinda Randall say?
Yeah. What does she say?
Well, her advice is to be mindful of the person behind you.
Okay.
Before you recline, take a peek back, see if they're already cramped or if they're using their tray table.
Right.
If so, maybe recline just a little or not at all.
Okay, so it's about that awareness again, like
Yeah.
considering the needs of those around you. But what if the person in front of you does recline, and it's really cramping your style?
That's where those communication skills come in.
Yeah.
You can politely ask if they wouldn't mind adjusting their seat a bit.
Okay.
Something like, "Excuse me, would you mind raising your seat slightly? I'm a bit cramped back here." Can go a long way.
Yeah, and I think that's where the tone of voice is really key too, right?
Totally.
Keeping it polite and friendly, even if you're like internally fuming.
For sure. Remember, nobody wants a confrontation on a plane.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance
Right.
between asserting your own needs and being respectful.
Okay, so we've covered reclining seats.
What?
What about the overhead bin wars?
Oh, the overhead bin's a true test of patience and spatial reasoning skills.
Yeah, it feels like the bins are getting smaller and the luggage is getting bigger.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Like those carry-on suitcases?
And with, airlines increasingly charging for checked bags,
Right.
no wonder people are trying to cram everything in those overhead bins.
There's got to be some etiquette around this. Right.
Definitely not a free-for-all.
Okay, good.
The general rule is try to stow your bag wheels first.
Okay.
So it takes up less space.
Right.
And if you have a larger item, like a rolling suitcase, it should go in the overhead bin.
Oh, yeah.
Smaller bags can go under the seat in front of you.
That makes sense. What about those people who, like, hog the entire bin for themselves?
Ugh, yes.
Or shove their bags in every which way, leaving no room?
Unfortunately, you'll always encounter those folks.
Right.
If it's causing a real issue, a flight attendant can usually help.
Right. It's like calling in the referee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But even in those frustrating situations, it's important to remember that,
Yeah.
everyone's just trying to get to their destination.
Right.
A little patience and understanding can go a long way.
Okay, so we've tackled reclining seats, overhead bins. What about noise level on a plane?
Ooh, that's another big one.
From crying babies to loud conversations.
Airplane noise can be a real challenge.
And I think everyone has different tolerances for noise, right? What's background chatter to one person might be a major distraction to someone else.
Totally. And it's not always easy to control the noise around you,
I get it.
especially in such a confined space.
So what's the best approach to dealing with, like, noisy neighbors?
If it's something minor, like a quiet conversation, it's often best to just try to tune it out.
Okay.
Pop in some noise-canceling headphones
Yeah.
or focus on a book or something.
Okay, but what about when it's more disruptive, like a blaring movie on an iPad or a loud phone conversation?
In those cases, you can politely ask the person to turn it down.
Right.
Again, using those clear, non-confrontational phrases.
Right, like, excuse me, would you mind lowering the volume a bit? I'm having trouble concentrating.
Exactly. You're politely, asserting your needs without accusing or blaming.
But I imagine there are times when people just aren't receptive to these requests. What happens then?
If it's truly disruptive and they're not being considerate, a flight attendant can be your ally.
Right.
They can usually step in and ask the person to be more mindful.
So it seems like the common thread running through all of these etiquette dilemmas is communication and choosing your battles wisely.
I think so. It's about finding that balance
Right.
between asserting your own needs and respecting the needs of those around you.
But what about those situations where there's a clear cultural difference in etiquette?
Ooh, that adds another layer for sure.
Yeah.
Different cultures have different norms around personal space noise levels, even how to address certain situations.
So how do we navigate those differences respectfully, especially when we might not even be aware of the specific cultural norms at play?
That's where observation and a bit of flexibility come in handy.
Okay.
Pay attention to the cues around you and try to adapt your behavior accordingly.
Right.
And if you're unsure, it's always best to err on the side of caution and politeness.
So basically be mindful, be respectful, be adaptable.
Yeah.
Solid advice for navigating not just airplane etiquette, but life in general. But let's be real, even with the best intentions, things can still go wrong on a plane. People can be stressed, short-tempered, just plain rude.
Oh, absolutely. It's important to remember that we're all human. We all make mistakes.
So what do we do when we encounter those passengers who just seem to be testing the limits of acceptable behavior? Do we confront them? Do we call on the flight attendant? Or do we just grin and bear it?
That's where things can get really tricky, and it's important to assess the situation.
Right.
Sometimes choosing to disengage is the best option, even if it feels frustrating.
I guess it comes down to weighing the potential benefits of addressing the situation
Hmm.
against the potential consequences of, like, escalating
For
things.
sure, ask yourself, is this worth ruining my peace of mind?
Right.
Sometimes a little bit of discomfort is a small price to pay for a smooth flight.
But I'm curious, when does a minor annoyance cross the line into something that needs to be addressed either by us directly or by a flight attendant?
That's a tough question, and there's no easy answer. It depends on a lot of factors, like the severity of the behavior, the context, your own personal tolerance level.
So it's not always a black and white situation. There's a lot of gray area.
Absolutely. And that's where, those critical thinking skills come in.
Yeah.
You have to weigh the pros and cons, consider the potential outcomes, and ultimately make the decision that feels right for you in that moment.
Okay. So we've talked about a lot of different etiquette scenarios,
Yeah.
but I think it would be helpful to hear some real life examples.
Okay.
Maybe even some stories from our own experiences
Yeah, I like that.
to really bring these concepts to life
Totally.
and help us see how these etiquette dilemmas play out in the real world.
For sure.
So let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll share some of our own airplane etiquette adventures, good and bad.
We'll also explore some tips for handling those, awkward encounters with a little more grace
Yeah.
and maybe even some humor.
So stay tuned because the deep dive continues.
Oh,
Welcome back. So we've been talking about all these, specific scenarios, these etiquette rules, but I've been thinking about the psychology behind it all.
oh yeah.
It's not just about knowing what the right thing to do. It's about understanding why these situations can feel so charged.
Right, because air travel is just a unique environment.
Yeah.
You're crammed in this tiny space with hundreds of strangers flying through the air.
Right, and it's like this pressure cooker of social anxiety,
It is.
especially for those of us who aren't the biggest fans of flying to begin with.
Exactly, and then you add in delays, turbulence, being so close to people you don't know.
Yeah.
It's just a recipe for stress.
So basically, our fight or flight response is already like on high alert.
Uh-huh.
So we're more likely to overreact to those minor annoyances.
Right, our brains are wired to perceive threats even when they're not there.
Yeah.
So if someone reclines their seat into your knees or blasts music without headphones, it triggers a much bigger response than it normally would.
It's like our personal space bubble shrinks to the size of our seat.
That's a good way to put it.
But it's also about realizing, everyone on that plane is dealing with their own stuff,
Yeah.
their own anxieties, their own triggers.
We tend to forget that everyone's going through something even if we can't see it.
All right.
That person who seems rude, they might be dealing with a personal crisis, a fear of flying,
Yeah.
just a bad day.
So it's a good reminder to practice empathy even when it's tough.
For sure.
But how much do our personalities play into all of this?
Like, totally.
Some people just handle these situations with grace, and others go from 0 to 60 in a heartbeat.
Well, some people are naturally more assertive,
Yeah.
comfortable speaking up, while others are more conflict avoidant
Right.
and would rather just suffer in silence.
So it's not about one approach being right or wrong.
Right.
It's about recognizing our own tendencies and finding ways to communicate our needs effectively.
Exactly. And also recognizing that we can't control the behavior of others.
Right.
Just our own reactions.
So choosing our battles wisely and managing our stress,
Yeah.
that can make a big difference in how we handle those airplane etiquette challenges.
Absolutely. And sometimes the best thing to do is just let it go.
Easier said than done.
I know.
But I think you've given us a lot to think about, maybe by understanding the psychology behind these situations.
Yeah.
We can all be a little more patient, a little more empathetic, and a little less likely to lose it over a misplaced armrest.
Exactly. We're all in this together, just trying to get from point A to point B
Right.
as safely and comfortably as possible.
Well said. So I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into airplane etiquette.
Okay.
We've talked about, reclining seats and overhead bins, to the bigger picture of communication and empathy and, choosing your battles.
Yeah. Hopefully we've given everyone some food for thought.
Exactly. And, the conversation doesn't have to end here.
Yeah.
We want to hear your thoughts and experiences.
For sure. Mm-hmm.
Have you found yourself in an etiquette conundrum? What are your tips for maintaining sanity in those close quarters?
Share your stories in the comments or on social media. We love hearing from you.
And until next time, remember, a little kindness and understanding goes a long way, especially when you're 30,000 feet in the air.
Safe travels, everyone.